Hi everybody, welcome back. So in this video I am going to be testing and reviewing the Geeetech A10M dual extruder, dual color mix printer. Thanks to Banggood for sending me this printer for free for the purpose of this review. So let's kick this off. We're going to do a little bit of unboxing. And then we're going to do a little bit of building. And then we're going to do a little bit, okay, maybe a lot of printing. With that done, let me get out of the camera and get a close-up of the printer, and let's talk about this printer. We'll talk about what it is, we'll talk about the prints I made with it, we'll talk about how easy it is, how hard it is, the different types of printing you can do. So without further ado, let me get out of the way and let's get on with this. Okay, so now the printer is fully assembled, and you can see I've made some prints with it, and I've got myself a checklist of things I want to cover that I discovered along the way, and the questions that I want to answer for you. So before we go any further, let's talk about the unboxing and the build, because I did skip over it really quickly. And the reason I did that was because it is really easy to do. When you take the pieces out of the box for this, you'll find that there are two major assemblies. The lower assembly, which has the lower rails, the bed, all the y-axis parts, including the stepper motor, the belt, the control panel, the limit switches, all completely assembled. Then there's the upper assembly, which has the side rails, the top rail, the x-axis rail with the hot end on it, with the motor, the limit switches, the belt, everything is on it and it's adjusted. So all you really have to do to assemble this printer is bolt the upper to the lower with 4 bolts, provided of course along with the tools to do it if you don't have your own. Mount the 2 extruders, mount the spool holders, mount the LCD panel, mount the power supply back here, much like where an Ender 3 is, and this pretty much is a copy of the Ender 3 with the exception of the 2 extruders up here instead of a single one down here on the x-axis rail. And plug all the wires in, which all have plug-in ends, and I like the plug-in end down here on the hot end a lot. And then power it on and level the bed, and you're ready for your first test print. And that's exactly what I did. So before I show you the prints and talk about them in my checklist, let's talk about what is a dual extruder mix printer. A regular dual extruder has the 2 extruders, it has 2 hot ends and 2 nozzles. Also has 2, and the hot ends are separate, so there's 2 heaters as well. So you can run anything you want, including multiple types of filament, and they can have 2 different temperatures. In a mixed printer, we don't have 2 nozzles and 2 heating chambers. We have a single heater and chamber, which is a mixed chamber, and we have a single nozzle. This gives us the advantage over a 2 nozzle system of being able to mix the 2 colors together. The disadvantage of it, of course, is we can only have a single temperature, and some types of filament might not like being mixed together. I'm probably going to experiment with that in the future just because it sounds like fun, but I have not yet, so I can't tell you how well that would work or not. But we can certainly mix colors, which means if we have black and white and what is it, red, green, and blue, we can pretty much get anything we want. I think you have to have yellow too, right? It's been a long time since finger painting in grade school. but you can pretty much get any color you want and any shade of any color you want, and you can even have 2-color, 3-color prints, gradients. You can have all kinds of different things with a mix type printer. So with that being said, let me go on and let's get the prints out and let's go through my checklist and let's talk about this printer and the prints and how difficult or easy it is and what you have to do to get up and running. Okay, before we take a look at the prints, let's look at the control panel because there's some neat action going on here. You see it's got Marlin 1.1.8 on it. There is a bootloader on this, so you can flash any version of Marlin to it that you want, even ones that won't work, and there's a bunch of custom versions of Marlin out for this. So, but let's take a look. Oh, let me go back. You'll see the info screen is your typical info screen, except it's got something called MX. That's your mix. Right now it's set to 100% on Extruder 0 and 0% on Extruder 1. But if I come down to Mixer here in the control panel, I can change my mix. If I want half white and half red, I just switch it to 50-50. If I want something else, I switch it to that. But I can do more than just that. I can come down to gradient, and I can say I want a gradient mix starting at Z1 going up to Z20, I can't get an even number, whatever, Z31.5, and I can go back to gradient mix and I can say start the mix at 100 and 0 and end at 0 and 100. Now that will run you through all the color available. In the case of my red and white, it will start me out at white and run me up through light pink to medium pink to dark pink and then all the way to red. But I can change that to anything I want. I can start those mixtures. I can start those mixtures at 10 and 90 or at 50-50 and end them at anything I want. That gives you full control over the colors that are coming out with the 2 filaments you have in. So that's pretty cool, and you'd be shocked at how much you can do with it. So taking a look at that, let's take a look at the prints and let's talk about the prints. So the first thing I printed was the test G code, and as you can see, it didn't turn out that well. It printed, of course, but anybody who knows about 3D printers will look at this and tell you it's under extruded. So I did what anybody who knows much about 3D printers will do. I went to the control panel, told it to extrude 100 millimeters of filament, and found it only extruded 90. Now, in the past, I used to go to a program called PrinterTest where I could pull out what the steps per millimeter for the extruder were, and I could then do the math and then put the new correct number in. With this one, you don't have to. You can do it all from the control panel. It will tell you what the steps per millimeter of everything is and let you put in new numbers. So I'm 10% under extruded. The math was really easy. I came up with a new number. I put it in, and I printed another one. I had to swap filament out because this was done with the provided white, small sample of white and purple filament. So this was the next one I did, and as you'll see, this one turned out pretty darn good. I'm really pretty happy with that. It's a nice print. It's again, this is the test G code. I have no idea how they sliced this. I didn't really look at it any different, but it printed pretty darn nicely. I have no complaints with that from a brand new printer. So the next thing I thought was, well, if you're new, because what we want to know is, will this printer work for somebody who's fairly new to 3D printing? If you're new, how long will it take you to get a first print that you sliced yourself? So assuming you searched Google for free slicers and came up with something like Cura, and Cura has a built-in profile. It does not have a built-in profile for the A10M. However, it does have a built-in profile for the Ender 3, whose dimensions are all the same. So that's what I did. I loaded up Cura, I put in the default Ender 3 profile, I sliced a Benchy, and told it to print, and this is what I got. Oops, not the best Benchy I've ever seen, but for a printer that has been mainly not even tuned, just bolted together, I can accept that. That's not a half-bad Benchy. So my next thought was, well, what about mixing? So I went to the control panel like I showed you earlier, and I told it to mix the colors. And I got a mixed color Benchy. Again, this is the Ender 3 profile, and it worked pretty darn well. It went from green at the bottom to white at the top. Sorry, I'm holding this off the camera. I got a light shining in my face. And it printed that really nicely. Again, I have no complaints about a Benchy that looks like this from a brand new printer. It just was bolted together, and really the only thing I adjusted was the extruder steps per millimeter. Not bad at all. So, next thing I loaded up was my favorite little low poly vase, and as you can see, I did that in the red and the white, and I told it to go from white at the bottom to red at the top. A full gradient, and that came out really nicely. No complaints there. So the next thing I did was I went back into Cura and I made myself a real A10M profile. Basically all I did was I said I had a new printer. I said it has 2 extruders, and then I put in all the dimensions and other parameters for the Ender 3 because it is the exact same size. And I went back to my vase as a test and I printed it, and this was on the A10M profile that I had just created. And there's a lot of people who have posted A10M profiles. I just decided I wanted to make one for myself, and it was very easy to do in Cura, and I got this vase, and it actually even looks nicer than the one. I reversed the color gradient. Instead of going from white to red, I went from red to white, but actually I think it's even a nicer gradient than the one that I printed with the Ender 3 profile. So that answered my question of how hard is it for a noob to get a 2-color print. It's really pretty easy. I'm going to go over those too. So the next thing I really wanted to do was I wanted to get a true 2-color print. So staying with the, well no, actually I stayed with the green, and of course when you do this you're going to get an associated purge block. And I quickly came to discover that I'm not a fan of purge blocks. But anyway, also in Cura, when you're doing, this is a 2-color Benchy, and you have to merge the 2 pieces. And in Cura, it's pretty easy. You do Control-A to select both, and then there's a right-click and there's a merge command. But you have to tell Cura, don't automatically place things on the bed or it goofs them up, and that's what it did with this one. I still kind of sort of got a 2-color print, but it wasn't what I was really after. So I started going back to the basics with 2-color prints, and then I did these 2, and you'll notice that the white in some areas is kind of a light pink. And of course that's because it's hard to clear the red out of the white, and you'll bleed over and you'll get a light pink. Red and white might be one of the worst scenarios short of black and white. But anyway, nonetheless it did it, and of course they had their associated purge blocks as well. And this is very fiddly. This is something that I would suggest the noob first start with. If you're new to 3D printing, you start with single color, go into the gradients, and then start working on your settings for the true dual color, because getting the prime tower sized correctly, getting its minimum volume set, getting its outer dimensions set, all that. And again, there are a lot of information about this printer on the internet. I tried other people's settings. None of them work really right. Some are better than others. So I decided just to keep working up my own. Now, one thing to keep and consider is that I'm doing most of these prints on a very coarse setting, so that's why they kind of look rough. With this one, I once again forgot to tell Cura not to place things automatically on the bed, and I lost the bottom of the traffic cone, but you can see I did get my my 2 colors, which is kind of nice, and the associated purge block that went with it. In this one here, I remembered to do the setting correctly, and I did get the base of the traffic cone, but my white did turn out to be a little on the pink side. And this panda, I'm not sure what happened with this panda, but his belly is missing. But I did get the purple and the white. So, with that being said, I decided I really hate purge blocks. So I thought to myself, how fast can this printer change colors on its own? And how much bleed over from one color am I really going to get if instead of telling it to do a smooth gradient of color change, I tell it to do it all at once? So I thought I would experiment and see how I could do. And this is what I got. And as you will see, it's not too bad. It can change colors on its own without a purge block pretty darn quickly. You will see a little bleed over of the red into the white that turned it pink, but funny, the bleed over of the white into the red, you can't even see it. That's the part that amazed me. And I did this particular part in the little color changing software that you can download from Geeetech's website. And that allows you to change colors multiple times with different gradients, all kinds of different things. So as long as you are willing to change colors via layer and not, you know, from left to right or forward to back, that's going to be the way to do it, because you won't need a purge block. And I like that so much, I printed this little lighthouse using the same method. No purge block to this at all. And not only did it change colors really nicely for me, but it printed it really nicely as well. Again, this was a fairly coarse setting. I think this was 0.32, 3 or 3.2. So it printed that really nicely. I'm quite pleased with that, and with the color changes as well. So that is the mix and the dual color printing on this. And honestly, it works really well. So let's go to my checklist here and let's answer some questions. The first was, how was the build? And the build was really easy. I mean, it couldn't be much easier than that without coming fully assembled. How long to first print? Well, it took me 40 minutes to unbox this thing and put it together. So if you're a brand new to 3D printing, it might take you twice that long. How long to a successful mix print? Well, that was a simply matter of going into the control panel and telling it, hey, give me a gradient, and pressing start. How long to a first successful dual print? Well, I'm not sure I ever had a truly successful dual print. And by dual print, I mean two different parts to the model merged together, and in Cura you tell it, okay, print this part in Extruder 0 and this part in Extruder 1, and then you merge the two. I'm not sure I ever got one totally 100% successful. The printer is certainly capable of it, but it's just a matter of getting the settings right. So that's fiddly. You're going to have to do some trial and error, some failure, and hopefully some success, but this printer is absolutely capable of that. So can a noob do it? A noob can certainly do the, in my opinion anyway, can certainly do the setup and can certainly do a single color print using an Ender 3 profile. And honestly, adding a profile is as simple as saying to Cura, new profile to extruders, and putting the Ender 3 numbers in, or downloading somebody else's off the internet. And there's a lot of help. So I think a noob can do this. And then, you know, he or she can build this thing, get a successful single color print, have fun with that, learn about the printer, then get a successful gradient print, have fun with that, learn about the printer, and then start dipping their toes in true dual color prints, because that does take a little bit of extra work. So how advanced is this whole thing to get true dual color prints? Well, I wouldn't call it super advanced, but obviously it takes some experience, it takes some trial and error, and it's going to take some patience in order to develop settings which will give you true dual color changes. Plus, if you're slicing, not if you're slicing, but if you're modeling your own things, you're going to have to learn how to model things in two pieces that will then merge together. And we may discuss that too. I've done it in Fusion 360. It's not really that hard, but it's not something you just download a 3D modeling software out of the blue and then just start making two parts and that merge together. It doesn't work that way. It's going to take some expertise and some practice. So how moddable is another question I wanted to answer about this printer. How moddable is this? Well, honestly, it's basically an Ender 3, so a lot of the parts that were moddable on the Ender 3 are going to be moddable here as well. One of the most common mods you see for this printer are people printing a block that lets you relocate the extruder at a different angle with the Bowden tube pointing straight down. It raises it up, it points the Bowden tube down, and it moves the filament spool holders out to one side and turns them. And that seems like it's something that's worthwhile to do. It obviously isn't necessary to make the printer work, but there's not a lot of room back in here to get filament threaded in and started. So at the very least, that would provide you a lot more room, as well as a straighter path for the Bowden tube. So I think this is quite moddable. There is a small, very active community that is making mods. If you get on Thingiverse and type in A10M, you will find all kinds of mods for this printer. And some of them are Ender 3 mods, and that's fine. I have no problem with that, but it is quite moddable. It is, the control board is open source. It's running a version of Marlin. There is a bootloader already on it. There are firmware updates for this printer. Mine, I just went with the one that's on it, but there's firmware updates, and it's got Marlin 1.1.8 as you saw earlier. There are firmware updates to 1.1.9, and I've even seen supposedly firmware updates to 2.0 on it, and we'll probably be trying those in the future. I did plug this printer into my computer. I put in the drivers provided by Geeetech, and the computer recognized it immediately and gave it a COM port, and I could talk to it via PrinterTest or via Cura. It was not a problem at all. So, what slicers to use? Well, obviously, Cura worked pretty well for me. I'm very familiar with Cura. It's what I use the most. I loaded up Idea Maker for a little bit, but Idea Maker's kind of tough for me because of the colors of the screen. My eyes do not like dark gray and light gray and black mixed together that well. So, I didn't work with it very much, but it obviously does have the settings you need. I don't have Simplify 3D, but I know that it does support dual extrusion as well as slicer. So I think your options for a slicer are quite good. You'll probably will for a while have to put your own profile in, but it's pretty easy to do considering all the dimensions are the same as the Ender 3. Next is value for the money. This is a $220 printer. The Ender 3 is $179, so this is basically $40 more than an Ender 3, but what you pretty much get is an Ender 3 with dual extruders, a mixing chamber, a bootloader already on it, and that you can already flash Marlin to or whatever you want without having to flash a bootloader to it first. Now, I don't know how the current Ender 3s ship. My two are earlier models. In fact, one of them was one of the first 500 shipped, and they did not have a bootloader. You had to flash one to it. So it was a little bit of an ordeal just to get a custom version of Marlin in it. This already comes with all the things that you want to do that. You don't have to do that. Also, the original Ender 3 came in a gazillion different pieces, and most of them didn't fit together very well. This was very easy. So, for value for the money, I would say this is an excellent value for the money. It gives you absolutely everything the Ender 3 gave you, plus it gives you the ability to do dual color prints and a little bit easier first off modding for flashing modified versions of Marlin. So that brings us to the last question on this list. Should you buy this printer? Well, in my opinion, if you're in the market for an Ender 3 and you don't at least consider this printer, you're probably doing yourself a disservice. Like I said, this thing will do everything the Ender 3 will do, and it has more functionality for only 40 bucks more. I'm not sure you can convert an Ender 3 to dual color printing for 40 bucks. You might be able to get close, and I know there are some things you can print, some Y adapters down here, but I have talked to a couple people who have done it who have had very mixed results. So that answers all the questions. This is a great printer for the money. I think it's a good starter printer for somebody who only wants to do single color and then dabble in mixed color and in dual color. It's pretty easy to do. It's very, very easy to build. I can't stress that enough. For a noob, that is a big thing, getting it out of the box and only having 12, 14, 16 bolts to put in, and it's all together and everything fits. I can't tell you how many Ender 3s I've seen where people just pushed and shoved until they got things to bolt up, holes to line up, and then the thing won't print. Well, not shocking there at all. So you don't have to do any of that with this. Honestly, I like this printer a lot. I'm going to do a lot of mods on this printer. One of the mods I'm looking at doing, of course, is rotating the extruders, but also putting a purge bucket in over here so that I don't have to have purge blocks. And that's something that requires a little bit of custom G-code in Cura in the startup and ending, but we're going to work on that. I'm going to have other videos on this printer. We're going to do some modding on it. We're going to have some fun in dual colors and maybe even experiment with dual filaments and see how things like being mixed together. So that's it for this review. I like this printer a lot. I think it's good value for the money. I think it's a good printer for everybody who's interested in a printer in this price range and who might want dual color. So I want to say thanks again to Banggood for providing this printer to me for this review, and thanks to everybody for watching. If you enjoy my videos, I hope you'll like and subscribe, hit notifications of course, and there will be coupon codes below as well as a link to this printer below. And yeah, thanks very much, and come back the next time. Bye for now.